Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my prediction for the upcoming death battle between Ace and Natsu. If you are wondering where my review of Megazord vs. Voltron is, I had actually completely finished recording that video, but then the audio file got all messed up, so I had to scrap it. In between researching for Natsu vs. Ace and just general life stuff, I haven't had the time or the motivation to redo that video just yet. It will be out before long though, probably before I do my Ace vs. Natsu review. Also, I really procrastinated with making this video, so it won't be as quality as it should be, but rest assured that the research and analysis was still very thorough. Alright, back to the normal script. In this video, I will be covering the characters' backstories, their powers and capabilities, why these characters were paired against each other, and then finally my prediction for who I think is going to win. Before I get started, I must tell you that I will be covering pretty massive spoilers for both Fairy Tail and One Piece. You have been warned. First up is Natsu Dragneel, the Salamander. In a land far away in the kingdom of Fiore, magical power is abundant in the world. However, only a small percentage of the population can utilize this power, and these special individuals are known as mages. These mages band together to form guilds, in which they offer to use their magical powers for services in exchange for money and various other rewards. And the most infamously destructive of these guilds is the Fairy Tail Guild, and one of its most infamously destructive members is Natsu. Natsu's story began several centuries prior with a man named Zeref, who was the greatest dark wizard to ever live. Long story short, Zeref was immortal, but he wanted to die, so he created an army of unstoppable demons with the hope that they could somehow find a way to kill him. And the most powerful of these demons was Natsu Dragneel. As a baby, Natsu was sent several centuries into the future through the use of a magical portal, and once there he was trained and raised by Igneel, the king of the fire dragons. Igneel taught Natsu things like speech and culture, but more importantly he trained Natsu in the use of magic, specifically Fire Dragon Slayer magic. Unlike regular fire magic, Dragon Slayer magic permanently alters the physiology of the wielder, causing them to take on the attributes of a dragon. Since Natsu was trained by a fire dragon, he naturally takes on the attributes of a fire dragon. This makes it so that fire cannot harm him, he can now produce fire from any part of his body, and he is now able to consume fire to boost his magical power. This art is called Dragon Slayer magic because dragons are pretty much the most powerful thing in the world, and thus the only thing capable of taking down a dragon is another dragon. This type of magic grants the wielder the power of a dragon, and thus this type of mage is generally considered the only type capable of slaying dragons, hence the name Dragon Slayers. Since their whole shtick is that they can slay some of the most powerful monsters in existence, it should come as no surprise that Dragon Slayers are generally among the most powerful mages in the world. After getting his training from Igneel, Natsu would go on to join the Fairy Tail Guild, and from there he would go on a vast number of world-saving adventures. Now that's the general overview of Natsu's story, let's get into the specifics of what he can do. Without his magic, Natsu is still a very physically powerful character. Normally one of the weaknesses of wizards is that their bodies are frail, however this is not the case with Natsu. Him being part demon, part dragon, his fighting style being almost entirely melee, and the fact that he picks fights with nearly everyone he meets has caused Natsu's body to be honed to a superhuman level. He is strong enough to lift this rather large stone block, which I estimated to be around 129,446 pounds or 64.7 tons. He is also fairly speedy and agile, as he regularly jukes around melee attacks and dozens of projectiles at once. His durability is particularly impressive. Not only does he regularly get the crap beat out of him by all manner of superhuman foes, but he also survived getting hit by a variety of highly destructive attacks. For example, in one instance, Natsu, while completely exhausted and drained of magic, was hit by the Grand Chariot spell, which hits with the force of a meteor strike. Not only did Natsu survive this with his body completely intact, but he actually got back up and continued fighting. This leads nicely into another of Natsu's advantages, his high tenacity. No matter how hard of a beating he takes, Natsu will always get right back up. In addition, Natsu has drastically superhuman senses. His sense of smell is as good as a bloodhound, if not better, and his sense of hearing is honed enough that he can hear a quiet conversation hundreds of feet away in the middle of a roaring coliseum filled with people. He can even hear someone getting robbed a mile away and then, going only off his hearing, throw out a fire blast with enough precision to hit the robber from a mile away. And if Natsu is ever against a foe that is too fast to track with his eyes, he can focus his other senses to help predict where they will be, although this will only work within a certain range of speed. If they're too fast, then he still can't hit them. But it's when Natsu has access to his magic that things get crazy. Natsu's primary fighting style is to greatly increase his striking power by coating his hands and feet in flames. Early in his career, a single fire-enhanced punch was enough to send a person flying hundreds of feet through half a dozen buildings. Natsu's most notable ranged attack is his Fire Dragon Roar, in which he launches a powerful blast of flame from his mouth. This attack can travel hundreds of feet and it tends to obliterate almost anything it touches. Now is as good a time as any to discuss the properties of Natsu's fire. First off, Natsu has the Flame of Emotion, which basically means that the angrier Natsu gets, the more powerful his flames become. In addition, Natsu's flames also have a number of more unique properties. They can work underwater, somehow, and they are even capable of burning through other types of magic. In terms of temperature, Natsu's flames can evaporate sand, which would require them to have a temperature of at least 5,340 degrees Fahrenheit or 2,949 degrees Celsius. However, since Natsu's flames become more intense the angrier he becomes, this is only a baseline for how hot the fire can be. Natsu has a variety of techniques he employs, but I won't be getting into too much detail about them since they all pretty much do the same thing, namely Natsu makes fire and then hits people with that fire. However, there is one technique of note. Natsu can use his fire as a propellant. This can be utilized to give Natsu an explosive high-speed dash, or it can be used to propel individual limbs to boost striking power. In addition, Natsu can propel fire out of his feet to grant himself the ability of flight. Oh, and I just recalled that Natsu can also change the properties of his fire to make it stick to surfaces. This allows Natsu to use his fire as a sort of grappling hook. He can launch his fire, have it stick to a surface, and then he can climb up that flame like a rope. Because magic. And that's more or less everything there is to know about Natsu's basic fighting style, and it has pretty much stayed the same over the years. However, what has changed is the sheer power and scope of his abilities. Thanks to a number of power-ups and time skips, Natsu's raw destructive power has skyrocketed over the course of his life. The first significant boost he received was when a Lightning Dragon Slayer granted Natsu some of his power. This allows Natsu to enter Lightning Fire Dragon mode. This mode enhances Natsu's fire attacks with lightning. Not only does this diversify Natsu's damage output, but it also drastically boosts the raw power of these attacks. The only downside is that this mode exhausts Natsu very quickly. However, this drawback was minimized by Natsu's next power-up, in which he unlocked his second origin. Long story short, mages have limited pool of mystical power within themselves that they can call upon, and by unlocking his second origin, Natsu's pool of energy was effectively doubled. Now that his magic has been drastically boosted, Natsu has a much easier time sustaining his Lightning Fire Dragon mode. However, Natsu's ultimate power-up comes in the form of the Dragon Force. By entering the Dragon Force, Natsu reaches his full potential and becomes as powerful as a dragon. This mode drastically boosts Natsu's speed, allowing him to match and surpass foes that were previously faster than the eye can track. It also grants him a massive boost in power. With the Dragon Force, Natsu was able to obliterate the skyscraper-sized Tower of Heaven, and most impressively, after being cast into the void between dimensions, Natsu was able to activate the Dragon Force and just break back into reality. But what is perhaps the most impressive aspect of these modes is that they are multipliers on Natsu's existing power. In other words, as Natsu gains power in his base form, his super modes become exponentially better, and by the end of his story, after spending a year intensely training, Natsu has reached absurd levels of power. Anytime he battles anyone, he flat out levels any nearby terrain just as a side effect of his attacks. Just him throwing out one or two casual fire blasts while in the middle of a stone coliseum is enough to cause the entire place to start melting. His fire-enhanced punch was powerful enough to obliterate a mountain-sized god of war. And his Fire Dragon Roar is now a several hundred foot wide blast of pure devastation, capable of one-shotting some of the most powerful mages in the land. Unsurprisingly, Natsu has quite the impressive resume. He has taken on armies of thousands of soldiers, defeated entire guilds of mages, taken down dark wizards capable of destroying entire towns in one shot, bested demons capable of conquering the entire country on their own, and of course he curb-stomped the aforementioned mountain-sized god of war. For all his impressive power, Natsu does have a number of weaknesses. Most notably, Natsu gets intense motion sickness should he ever find himself on any form of vehicle, and the term vehicle is applied very loosely here. Basically, if Natsu is on anything that is moving that isn't an animal, then he will be completely incapacitated. By abusing this weakness, many weaker enemies have gotten the better of Natsu, and he would have died in a number of situations if his friends hadn't bailed him out. Another weakness is that Natsu has a limited supply of magic, and should he run out, his ability to fight is greatly reduced. He can restore some of his magic by consuming fire, but he cannot eat fire that he himself produced. It has to originate from another source. Also, Natsu can only control control the flames that he created. He cannot control flames created by anyone else. In addition, Natsu is very much so lacking in versatility and intelligence. If he can't win by either beating the crap out of someone or incinerating them, then he is plumb out of luck. And when I say he is lacking in intelligence, I mean that he is described by the manga as a simple-minded idiot with an intelligence of 2 out of 5, which is pretty accurate. Natsu isn't completely brain dead, but he never proactively strategizes. By this I mean Natsu can adapt if he has to, but he will never go into a battle with some clever plan in mind. When Natsu faces a trickier opponent, the fight will typically consist of him rushing the opponent, failing, rushing them in a slightly different way, failing again, and then repeating this process until he eventually wins, either through his tenacity, power, or just plain luck. As such, any legitimately intelligent foe is more than capable of outsmarting Natsu. And that's just about everything I know about Natsu Dragoneel. On to Ace. Ace was the child of a notorious pirate that was executed before Ace was born. He was then left in the care of some mountain bandits on an island covered in extremely dangerous jungle. With such an intense upbringing, Ace very quickly became more than capable of fending for himself, and he also very quickly settled on a goal, namely to set sail and become a pirate. In order to accomplish this goal, Ace would need money, so from the age of 10 and onwards, Ace would spend every day wandering the dangerous jungle of his island in search of bandits to beat up and then rob. Fast forward about a decade and Ace successfully sets sail. He even captains his own pirate crew for a bit, and somewhere along the way, Ace found and then ate a devil fruit. Devil fruit are items in the world of One Piece that grant various powers when consumed. The fruit Ace ate granted him the ability to produce flames from his body as well as transform his body into fire. Later, Ace joined the Whitebeard pirate crew, and Whitebeard himself ended up becoming a bit of a father figure for Ace. Ace quickly climbed the ranks and became Whitebeard's second in command. Ace then went on to spend the rest of his life doing everything he could to help Whitebeard become the king of the pirates. That's the general overview of Ace's story. Now let's get into the specifics of what he can do. Even without his devil fruit powers, Ace is a very superhuman character. At the age of 10, he was already strong enough to break down a 5-foot wide tree with just 2 kicks, which is bonkers. That would require tens of thousands of pounds of force to achieve. While I don't have the time to calculate the specifics of this feat, I can tell you that a car crashing into this tree at 100 miles per hour wouldn't do anywhere near as much damage. So Ace's attacks literally hit like a truck to the face. Ace has also always been very agile. As a child, he could swing on vines and climb trees and cliffs with little effort. As an adult, Ace has become very fast. In one instance, some dumb kid shot at Ace from a few feet away with a flintlock pistol, and in the time it took for the bullet to travel a foot or two, Ace was able to reach down, pick up a pebble, and then throw that pebble with enough force and accuracy to stop the bullet mid-air. This would require Ace to be moving at least 540 miles per hour. Ace is also a highly skilled and competent fighter. While growing up, Ace would often get into fights with a boy named Luffy, who had a devil fruit power. Despite having no powers of his own at the time, Ace still beat Luffy every single time that they fought. And as he's grown, Ace has only become a more and more skilled warrior, hence how he became the second in command of the Whitebeard Pirates. Ace is also highly tenacious, as he once fought a fish man for 5 days straight. However, it is with his devil fruit power that Ace becomes such a powerhouse. He can create an effectively unlimited supply of fire. He can utilize a number of techniques, including using his fingers like guns to shoot pinpoint fire blasts, and he can even release little green fire orbs that float towards opponents before detonating on Ace's command. Ace's most iconic attack is his Fire Fist technique, in which he launches a pillar of flame directly from his fist, powerful enough to obliterate 5 enemy ships in one go. However, Ace's ultimate attack consists of him making a massive ball of fire over his head, which he then launches at a foe. This attack is powerful enough to eclipse half of an island, and it can even destroy an entire town. In terms of defense, Ace can turn his entire body into fire. This makes Ace invulnerable to most normal physical attacks such as knives and bullets, as they just pass right through him. And while Ace can only control fire he himself created, there is a workaround. You see, Ace has a Logia devil fruit power, which is a class of devil fruit that all provide pretty much the same ability. Namely, they all provide the wielder control over an element while also granting them the ability to turn into that element. As such, all Logia powers have similar capabilities and limitations, and other Logia users have demonstrated that by mixing the element they create with a naturally occurring sample of that element, they can exert some control over it. This means that it is probable that Ace, by mixing his fire with fire from other sources, can exert a degree of control over flames that he himself did not create. Outside of his devil fruit powers, Ace also has access to something called Haki. Haki is a form of natural life force energy that, when tapped into, grants the wielder superhuman powers. Ace only has access to Conqueror's Haki. Conqueror's Haki, when activated, releases a wave of energy that renders all nearby weak-willed enemies unconscious. In terms of weaponry, Ace is usually seen possessing a large knife, although he never really tends to use it in battle since he has superpowers. Now for weaknesses. A major weakness that all Devil Fruit users share is that a side effect of consuming a Devil Fruit is that the wielder loses the ability to swim. Thus, if they ever fall into a body of water, they will sink like a rock. In addition, the ocean is their kryptonite. If they are exposed to even a small amount of seawater, they will have their Devil Fruit powers sealed away until they get out of the water, and they are immediately drained of all of their stamina. Logia users in particular tend to suffer from dangerous levels of overconfidence, as they tend to think of themselves as invincible, when in reality, they are not. The easiest way to harm a Logia user is through Haki. A Haki-enhanced attack will harm a Logia user's body no matter what state it is in. So if Ace were to turn his hand into fire and then that fire were to get hit by a Haki-enhanced attack, then Ace's human hand would take damage. In addition, all Logia users have an elemental weakness. As such, since Ace uses fire, dunking him in water will obviously put him at a major disadvantage. However, in actuality, anything that is capable of smothering Ace's fire has the potential to harm Ace. You see, fire requires oxygen in order to survive, so if Ace turns his body into fire and then that fire gets smothered, Ace will be forced back into a human state. And once in a human state, Ace is vulnerable to being harmed by anything that would harm a normal human, including fire. In addition, Ace is very much so lacking in versatility. If he can't win through fire or punching, then he's not winning. In addition, Ace is, of all things, narcoleptic. This means that whenever he's in a comfortable environment, Ace will just randomly fall asleep, even when in the middle of a conversation or while eating. This has never happened to him while in combat, but it's still a weakness nonetheless. And that's just about everything I know about the characters. Before I get to my prediction, here are the reasons these characters were paired against each other. Fairy Tail versus One Piece. These series are extremely similar and thus have an extensive rivalry. Both of these characters use fire as their weapon of choice. Both are superhumanly strong and agile. Both adore their adoptive fathers, and said adoptive fathers heavily influenced how these characters lived their lives. And both characters were adopted into a guild/crew who the characters love above all else. Alright, now for my prediction. I think the winner of this death battle will be Natsu. This was an interesting matchup to analyze due to the unique nature and interaction of their powers. However, as a whole, Natsu comes out on top in most categories. When comparing their base stats, I am almost certain that Natsu has the edge in strength. I can't be sure what the numbers are on Ace's tree-breaking feat, but since Natsu can lift as much as 130,000 pounds, I can't honestly see Ace doing much more than matching Natsu, if that. And even if Ace had the edge in strength, it wouldn't matter because Natsu blows Ace out of the water in terms of durability. Natsu once tanked a spell that hit with the force of a meteor strike. For comparison, in 1908, a meteor fell to Earth in the Siberian forests of Russia, and despite it being not that big of a meteor, it still leveled 770 square miles of forest. It was estimated to have hit with over 1,000 times the force of the nuclear bomb dropped on Hiroshima. For Natsu to survive anything even remotely comparable to that is insane, and outclasses anything Ace has survived by leaps and bounds. In fact, Ace isn't all that much more durable than an ordinary human. He avoids attacks by turning into fire, but whenever another Devil Fruit user actually managed to land a blow on Ace, it does serious damage. Just 1 or 2 hits is enough to have Ace spitting up blood. And while Ace has the edge in speed, that advantage goes away the longer the fight goes on. Natsu's speed is dependent upon his fire, and since his fire gets more powerful the longer a fight goes on, his speed continually increases, so if Ace doesn't end the fight quickly, which he can't, then that speed advantage goes out the window. And when comparing their invulnerabilities, Natsu's immunity to fire is a far greater asset than Ace's immunity to ordinary physical attacks. Ace only has 3 ways to kill an opponent: his fire, his knife, and his fists. His fire is useless because Natsu is immune, his knife is useless because Natsu gives off enough heat that steel melts just by getting near him, and Ace's fists are useless for 2 reasons. 1, Natsu can tank nuclear blasts, so Ace's punches aren't gonna do jack, and 2, in order to punch Natsu, Ace will have to return his hand to a human state, which is vulnerable to getting burned. And since Natsu regularly coats his entire body in intense fire whenever he's fighting, Ace is liable to burning his hand clean off if he ever tries to punch Natsu. As such, Ace is literally incapable of killing Natsu. By contrast, Natsu is more than capable of killing Ace in a variety of ways. First off, Ace can be harmed by Haki even when in his fire state, and Haki is just a form of natural life force energy. This can be exploited by Natsu because Fairy Tail's magic is also just a form of natural life force energy. Throw in the fact that Natsu's dragon fire is specifically capable of burning through other types of magic, and I see no reason why Natsu couldn't just outright hurt Ace even in his Logia form. But even if Natsu couldn't directly hurt Ace, he can if he smothers Ace's fire and forces him into a human state. And Natsu has demonstrated the ability to do just that from all the times he has smothered the flames of other fire users. All that's required for him to do this is that his fire has to be more powerful than Ace's, which it very evidently is. Ace's ultimate attack is just capable of eclipsing about half an island. However, it didn't actually destroy the island, it didn't even kill anything on the island. The most that can be said of it is that it can destroy an entire town, and while that's impressive and all, it's nothing compared to Natsu. By the end of his story, Natsu's fire breath has demonstrated that it can match if not outright surpass Ace's ultimate attack in terms of raw destructive power. And that's just Natsu's base fire breath. As Natsu gets angrier and uses his super forms, that blast will multiply in power. And whereas Ace can destroy an entire town, Natsu can destroy mountain-sized gods. But even if Natsu's magic couldn't hurt Ace, and even if Natsu couldn't smother Ace's fire, Natsu can always fall back on just eating him. Natsu straight up consumes fire. So if Ace stays in a human form, then Natsu will obliterate him, and if Ace turns into fire, then Natsu will devour him. And if their weaknesses of vehicles and the ocean were to come into play, then Natsu's weakness wouldn't actually help Ace. Even when incapacitated, Natsu is still ridiculously durable and immune to fire, so Ace still can't kill him, whereas if Ace is exposed to the ocean, then he will be forced back into a human form, making him a sitting duck for Natsu to kill, especially considering Natsu's fire works underwater. And while Ace may be able to exert a degree of control over Natsu's fire early on in the fight, as Natsu gets angrier and angrier, his flame of emotion makes his fire impossible to control by anyone except Natsu. Ace's Conqueror's Haki only works on people with weak wills and is thus useless against Natsu. Ace may have the edge in intelligence, but if he cannot kill Natsu, then that doesn't matter. As such, I am 96.5% certain that Natsu is going to win this death battle. As for the ending pun, maybe something like, Natsu wasn't dragon tail in this fight, or Ace sure got dragon to hell in this fight. Ha! Like if you enjoyed the video, comment if you have something to say, subscribe if you want to see more, and as always, have a fantastic day.